Thank you very much, and thank you for joining me here today for our session, Progressive Web Applications Beyond Headless. McFadyen Digital is proud to be a sponsor, the title sponsor of the Commerce Track here for Insight 20. And we would like to thank the whole Quest team and the whole Insight team for putting this together. We always have great experiences with them and with this community, so we're just really happy to be here. So what I'm here today to discuss is progressive web applications. We're going to go over what is a progressive web application, why use a progressive web application, who's using that currently successfully, how to implement this technology, this front-end technology, and then we're going to go into a little bit of a live Q&A where hopefully I can elaborate on some of these topics. Like I said, my name is Tom Gaydos. I am the CMO and digital marketing practice lead for McFadyen Digital. I have a vast experience with e-commerce. I was an e-commerce full stack developer front and back end earlier in my career. Went into digital marketing from there, lead our customer facing practice. Our UX practice rolls up to marketing. We have a great team that handles all of that and is very, very familiar with the PWA technologies. So it's been very exciting working on this particular topic. So McFadyen Digital, I'll get our little commercial out of the way here. So why do we know about this? Well, we've been around for a long time. Right? We were founded 33 years ago. We've been doing e-commerce for 22 years and actually online marketplaces for 11, which is still kind of early in the hype cycle, but we got ahead of that and have had some great success in that model as well. We have a global practice, North America, 3 locations in India, location in Brazil, where we deliver from, where we run projects out of in pretty much every region in the world. We currently have projects going on in 7 different countries around the world. So we've been doing this for a while. We know what we're doing. We get awards and our clients get awards for our work. So we are very enthusiastic about this space and very big believers in these kinds of innovation topics. So what do analysts think about progressive web applications? Well, Gartner says that 50% of native applications on phones, on desktops and whatnot, that are currently app-based will be replaced by PWAs by the end of 2020. Mobile apps will slip into a niche role, right? Forrester is calling for mobile apps to be the exception rather than the rule for mobile engagement. That's how much they believe in the power of PWAs. And then Business Insider says over 50% of consumers don't know if their favorite fashion retailer even has a mobile app, but they've been to their site, usually know the URL by heart. About 85% of people know the URL by heart of their favorite retailers. So if you can just go to the site instead of installing an app and have that app-like experience, that's a pretty big benefit. So where are we in the hype cycle here for both Headless and PWA? Well, Headless, the whole concept is still coming off the innovation trigger and crossing that chasm, if you will. Whereas as progressive web applications have already crossed that chasm, right? In terms of now they're going through into the trough of disillusionment. Now this is from August of 2019. So I really think when that next report comes out, the next hype cycle comes out, we're probably going to be about here on the beginning of slope of enlightenment, because the benefits of PWA are becoming incredibly clear, as we see here, right? What's our proof point for, is this a technology I should be getting on board with? Well, why are 50% of the apps going to be PWA instead of native applications by the end of 2020? Well, look at the dates on some of these articles, right? Microsoft has turned Outlook, if you go onto just the Outlook site now for Office 365, you'll notice you can install that as an app, right? So it's got some offline potential. It's got some of the native app functionality that you're used to. And that was just the end of last year. So this year, Google already announced, and this was a big thing, right? That they're taking Chrome apps away from the Chromebooks and the Chrome operating system and just relying on PWAs. Netflix is also testing the waters. Their Windows 10 app is going to be the first one in PWA. Google's doing the same things with their Android apps on Chrome OS. And then PWAs have gained some new capabilities recently. And that when you think about some of the task bars and some of the shortcut bars that you have and screens that you have on laptops, mobile devices, things that you can use as companion devices, a PWA is now going to allow you to do things like go to cart, checkout as shortcuts. Save a quote if you're B2B as a shortcut. So it's gaining a lot more capabilities, and you can start to see now why that would be advantageous for these companies, or I should say, as we'll talk about here. So what is a progressive web application? PWA is a mobile app delivered through the web rather than install, right? So when you're publishing a retail app or a B2B app or any kind of app, the app store is often one of those barriers where it gets hung up in approvals. You don't know what's going on with it. They'll disallow things for random reasons. You don't have to deal with that at all with a progressive web application. It is delivered directly from your URL. Now, Google is the backer of this. Google founded progressive web applications in 2015. Now, they define it as progressive, so we know what that means, right? It works regardless of browser choice using progressive enhancement. As the browser becomes more capable, the site will add more capabilities. It's responsive. It means just any form factor, right? It's like responsive web design. Faster after initial loading. So once you load it once, it will cache, and then the second time it is markedly faster, often 10, 20 times faster. Connectivity independent. A PWA has the capability, you don't have to enact it, but it's advantageous if you do, to have cached local content. So you can cache a product catalog, you can cache just sections of that catalog, and access it even when you're offline. You can check out when you're offline, as we'll see. An app like Feel, it feels like a native app. It's always up to date. You don't have to constantly key things. It acts like a native app. It's safe, right? HTTPS, not going to be tampered with. It's discoverable, and the search engines can both see and index it, and as we'll see, prefer it. It's engageable. You can use push notifications, web push, device push notifications, in addition to email and on-site alerts, and it's installable. You can provide home screen icons just on a mobile app. You can, or home screen icons on mobile. You can install it, as we'll see later, like with the Twitter app on a desktop or a laptop. So all of these factors are what constitutes a progressive web app according to Google. Oh, and linkable, sorry. You can link directly to the content. Unlike applications where you often have problems linking back and forth from websites, that could be a challenge. This allows you to link directly. So the key components of a progressive web application, there's the display side, but then there's, when you think about the differentiation between a website and a PWA, what are the things built into a PWA that are different? Well, service worker, this is something that allows you to, it's basically a JavaScript file that operates as a type of web worker, right? And that allows the main browser thread to handle push notifications, synchronize data, cache and retrieve resource requests, intercept network requests, receive centralized updates, things like that. It's an attempt to give progressive web applications the true power of a native application. There's the manifest, which is really just the JSON payload, the data that you're shuttling back and forth. There's got to be some type of web storage there. You see with the database libraries, there's an IndexedDB library that allows NoSQL querying, that allows you to store the storage locally on the device. And then all this is operated with GraphQL, which is the Facebook created data query language to manipulate the APIs. So what about web accelerated or accelerated mobile pages? This rides shotgun with PWAs in that AMP is basically the front end of a PWA. It really skinnies down the page size. It caches. There's a caching engine in there, and it really does give you just a lot more performance. And this is part of all the service worker stuff and all of the app-like functionality is kind of the back end, and that's the app-like functionality end. This is the display end where it really does accelerate that delivery, and all of the benefits that come along with it. As we can see here, you have your CMS. Your CMS is then connected to both the standard HTML page and the AMP HTML. Oops, back and forth here accidentally. That's often 90% smaller, the AMP HTML. So it's really a skinny down version. And then if someone wants to see the full version, they can always click out to it. But in a traditional CMS, that's just that content at the client side is then just delivered. And so we're using an example of the 8-second load time here. Well, with AMP, again, the front end of PWA, it runs through, it's skinnier, it runs through a caching engine. So again, that second time that you hit it, it's going to be much, much faster to get down to a 0.7 second page load time. And that really, as we'll see, that really matters in terms of conversion. So speaking of that, why would you use a PWA? Why would you want to put a headless front end on your site that is prioritizing mobile, that has all these offline features, that has app-like functionality? Well, visitors are impatient. They will not, most of them will bounce after, about the 3-second mark, especially on mobile. They get even more impatient on mobile. And that really just starts costing you real money. Walmart and Amazon both observed 1% increase for every 100 milliseconds of improved page speed. That's crazy. Google loses 20% of their traffic for every 100 milliseconds it takes it to the page to load. Shopzilla, 6 seconds to 1.5 seconds, increases earnings by 12%, increases page views by 25%. That's people, otherwise that was just people bouncing and getting impatient. A web page slowdown for Amazon, they had calculated, could cost them $1.6 billion in revenue annually just for that slight slowdown, that 1 second. And we're going to take a look at some 1 second stats here as well that are fascinating. And Shopify reports that 47%, sorry, almost half of their customers expect a web page to load in 2 seconds or less. And when you're dealing with mobile networks and all sorts of variables, that's a pretty crazy customer expectation, but that's reality. And then 79% of web shoppers who do have trouble say they won't return to that site and buy again. We just saw that in a grocery survey recently, that the grocery industry has popped, with the pandemic situation and whatnot. And it was 50%, a little over 50%, it was like 51% from a Brick and Click survey, said they will not return to the same site they had just ordered online groceries from that they did before. And that lack of brand loyalty in grocery is stunning. But it was mostly because poor expectations, poor product availability, but the number one was poor user experience. And it's because the sites are slow and they're old and they just don't have that modern experience. So that's a real life example of people bouncing when they don't have a bad experience, and then it sours them to the point where they're not going to come back. And this is just a fascinating visual here. This is another visual of the 3 second rule here. And this is tracking desktop, mobile, and tablet. But especially on mobile, where there's, again, the pandemic and the kind of our new normal has really popped commerce more than anything, people get super impatient around that 3 second mark. You see that stunning drop off. And then you've got the folks that are just, there's another pop here where it's like, well, I've waited for it this long to load, so I might as well complete it. But much better to just enact the proper speed on the front end and get them to stick around and have the good experience in the first place. So this is the single second stats that I was talking about, right? A single second delay. Page views down by 11%. Customer satisfaction down by 16%. 7% conversion rate gone immediately. 90% bounce rate if you're above that 3 second load time. And if you transact 100,000 per day, which is a larger enterprise site, you miss $2.5 million in revenue for every second. So that's why speed is so important. That's kind of the quantification of why speed is important. Now, when we're talking about the importance of that speed and the importance of these features, when you look at a PWA versus a responsive website versus a native application, you can see in this chart here how that starts to break down and break in favor of the PWA. The full screen presentation, can't do that with responsive, right? Can't do offline content viewing, push notifications, or offline checkout with responsive. Just like with a native app, you lose the search engine friendliness, unless you're replicating that content completely. You lose the content aggregation. There is a download required for a native app, right, where a PWA just installs pretty much instantly. There isn't cross-device responsiveness. There isn't updates. Or there is updates required in a native app, right? The PWA kind of updates itself, so you never need to say, oh, this app is out of date. The direct link content is helpful, in B2B situations and consumer situations alike. And then bypassing that app store approval process, if you've ever dealt with that, it can be a nightmare, especially for enterprises that really need that out fast. That's something where you gain huge benefit from controlling your own fate. So how do we measure site performance, right? Well, what's the proof point that we've done and tested out here? Well, we've used Google Lighthouse, and this is just a page speed tool built into Chrome. So click F12 in Chrome and click Audits or hit it in the drop-down menu, and then you can just measure whatever page speed you want. Now, we've seen some drastic improvements here. Now, this was on a sandbox environment. So this was our OCC, our Oracle Commerce Cloud sandbox, just a speed test. And you can see 8.8 seconds. It's a little sluggish. This is with a stock theme, again, on a sandbox. But keeping in mind on that sandbox, with the PWA front end that we built, the accelerator that we built, look at this. That first contentful paint goes from 8.8 to 0.7 seconds. And the first meaningful paint, when you're really seeing the full picture of the page, 9.6 seconds to, again, 0.7. And when that's repeated and cached, that drops even more, right? Down to about 0.4 seconds and 0.3 seconds respectively on the PWA side. So that's the kind of games we're looking at. We're even getting that performance just from a sandbox with minor tweaking. Right, and for another, this is a production site example, right? This is a production stand-up of OCC. You can see it's faster than it was on the sandbox. But look at the difference between AliExpress, who is running a PWA. It's a stunning difference. Again, you see this, the differences here. These are some commercial sites running and just the tests that we were running here. So that score of 99, 98, 99, 100, they're not all of those things that you have to worry about, losing stats and losing conversion and whatnot. They just don't have to worry about that. It's already handled, and they're guaranteed to be best in class. This is just a visualization of what that looks like, right? The OCC versus the page loads, versus PWA page load visualization. And you can see here that the first paints, the first meaningful, the speed, all of the blue is the PWA, how much faster that comes in. And look at this though, how much of that comes in terms of visual speed before the 3-second period. So the meaningful paint is really where you need to get to. This is beating that easily, and this is just kind of the mean. And then the time to interact, with a lot of that, you can start even before it's done completely loading, you can interact with it, and that's kind of the parallel loading advantages of a PWA gives you that. So it's and you would see the same thing on top of Oracle Commerce ATG as well. So another benefit here, they do install and run like native apps, right? So you can you click send to, add to home screen, and it'll add to the home screen, just like a native application. You run it just like a native application. You really don't remember at all that it's a web application at all. When you're running it and using it and whatnot, same experience as an app. And then this is why it runs in a browser like a native app. It doesn't have the browser bar. It doesn't have the menu. It's running like it's a native app. And then you can also switch between it. And like you see in this example, it does say PWA Shop. It doesn't say Safari, or it doesn't say Chrome, or whatever browser you're running it in. And that's true regardless of device. If I installed the PWA web shop on my Mac here, you would see the same thing. When you flip between it, it's not a browser. It looks like an actual native app. Some other reasons to use it, web push is a lot more effective than email. And web push is supported with various success on iOS, but pretty much blanket in Android, as we'll see in a second. But that's going to be supported. I mean, Apple's being pressured into supporting more and more PWAs as they become more prevalent. So that's going to become less and less of a barrier as we kind of advance up the hype cycle into the innovation curve there. So much higher engagement, much higher open rates with push. And then you have to keep in mind that some people just don't have high bandwidth, right? 63% are accessing it over a 2G network. Just a lot of rural areas don't have strong internet connectivity in terms of LTE and things like that. So it's beneficial there. A lot of job sites, low bandwidth. 60% of users will set it as a home screen icon if given the opportunity, which keeps it in front of them, keeps fresh eyes on it. And 40% user engagement increase, when you take advantage of the entire suite and the entire toolkit that the PWA gives you. So speaking of compatibility, this is what basically you can do on pretty much any. This is Chrome on Windows 10, but if you looked at an app, a Mac and Chrome, or a Mac and Safari, it would be very similar in terms of what you can and can't do. And we're going to be sending the deck out and whatnot. And you can go to that what web can do today site to see what how this will interact on whatever device you're looking at. And it just gives you clear checkboxes and whatnot. But you can see most of the app functionality is there. Some things, geofencing, proximity sensors, things like that aren't really needed for online integration or for desktop integration. And then you can see kind of what that looks like when we go through the various operating system combinations with browsers. It varies from thing to thing. So it's not full app compatibility, but it's moving towards more full app compatibility, especially with things like push notifications, with geolocation, with being able to integrate with native payments like Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, things like that, Google Pay. So it's capable now, but getting even more so. So the investment will not be wasted. So who's using PWA in the real world here? Well, we've got Alibaba, of course, small little marketplace over in China, largest in the world. They've been converting at 46% greater across browsers since implementing a PWA. 14% more monthly active users on iOS, again, probably attributed to speed and being able to set it as a home icon and just remember it. And then a 4 times higher interaction rate. So that's pretty much a testament to the power of it. Lancome, same thing, 53% boost in mobile traffic. And that's also because the search engine benefits that you get from this, because Google really prioritizes mobile first now. A 17% increase in conversions and an 8% rise in conversion rate. And then Flipkart, similar results, actually a little bit higher in most of these categories, right? 70% greater conversions, higher re-engagement, 3 times lower data usage, and that's Flipkart's a marketplace. So that's a marketplace leveraging a PWA. They're in the forefront of a couple different waves there. Plus, there's a little site called Twitter, this little social service that went PWA. You can now just natively, if you're in your browser, click install Twitter, and then it fires up like a native app. And again, you notice there's no browser header here, even though this is just running in a browser. And you flip between it just like you would a native app, whether it's on your phone or on the desktop. So it's pretty cool. Then there's Canva, one of my favorite content creation tools. They are also a PWA. Now, they're not installable like Twitter. They don't allow you to do that. But if you're working on this and designing something and you're laying out an ebook or a social graphic or something, and you're on a train and you lose your connectivity, you can keep working no problem. And if it picks up half an hour later, it just then syncs that stuff back up online immediately as soon as it reconnects. So that's how that's another inventive use of the PWA. So how do you implement this kind of technology? Well, we have a PWA Shop Accelerator. We call it the McFadyen PWA Shop. It's an accelerator for OCC, and it's based on the Vue storefront PWA framework. And what this looks like is that you have the 3 layers here. You've got the platform layer, the API layer, and the browser layer. I mean, the platform layer can be anything. For this example, it's OCC. It could just as easily be Oracle Commerce ATG. And then connecting through the REST APIs to communicate with the various layers. And the unique part of this, as we talked about before, was the service worker and the IndexedDB storage are working in the browser. And that's what makes it feel not like a browser. And that service worker is what makes sure that it's constantly pinging the API connector for updates on was there new images, was there stock status updates, was there additional information that you need that can be pushed to you, that's trigger-based or data-based in any way. It can go and retrieve information proactively in terms of caching products and collections, and just product information, new catalog categories. If there's new data, data sheets or information or collateral available for a product, that can be proactively pushed and cached. So not only do you not have to update the app, if you're connected to Wi-Fi or depending on your preferences, cellular as well, it'll automatically keep that updated through the service worker. And then as we saw with the AMP technology for the display, that combination is just killer in terms of speed, in terms of keeping things updated. And then we have the queue and Redis over here. So queue is it's a feature-rich priority job queue for Node.js. It's backed by Redis. Real clean user interface for viewing and managing like any queued, active, failed, completed jobs, anything like that. And the good thing is that at any point in that job's life, you can get pretty much verbose details, like just querying the status in terms of like creation, update, failure, completion times, things like that. So for developers, that's a very useful thing for error handling, for queuing, for anything like that. And especially when it comes time to placing orders. And that's one of the things that allows you to do offline orders, which is one of the cool things about PWA. With all of this technology, all this flow, all this intelligence, if you start shopping, and again, we'll use the train example or the plane example, right? You lose connectivity and you want to complete shopping with things that you've had cached, you have the product catalog cached in your phone, you can then place that order and complete it and check out with Apple Pay or Samsung Pay, and it just sits there and holds it. And then as soon as it gets connectivity, it syncs it and your order is placed. So that's a lot of great convenience for retail. There's applications there for B2B as well. So that's a killer feature of this pretty much, and that's that whole Q Redis stack, the worker tool here that allows that to happen in conjunction with the service worker. So our web shop reference store, I was going to try and do a demo here, but the demos get a little, live, get a little squirrely sometimes with connectivity, and Comcast was Comcasting this week for me, so that my connection hasn't been great. So I just put some screenshots up here, but what this does is show you what our reference store looks like. And what this does is it embodies all of the cool things that we were just saying, right? You can add it as an app, as we had the screenshots where we were doing. So it does run on anything. It runs on any form factor, runs on any device. I pulled this up in a store in a Best Buy that I was at before all of this stuff started. And I pulled it up on a Samsung refrigerator. I pulled up our reference shop and was just messing around with it because I could. So it really is compatible with any device. It runs like a native app. You use the OCC admin console just like you would. The business user tools are available for complete management of the catalog and whatnot. So it doesn't, even though it's headless, it's not completely disconnected. You're still using the native OCC tools for content management. and it's just, especially starting with this reference store though, it's a real accelerator to getting going with e-commerce PWA. So that's pretty much a wrap here before we get into the Q&A part. So the things to remember are that progressive web apps combines the best of responsive and the best of native. They're fast, they work offline, they're cross-platform, enable push notifications, a lot of other of the native app functionalities, like the full screen experience and things like that you expect. They increase your SEO dramatically, just in terms of looking at it mobile first. They're completely indexable. So it's just really something that's worth considering, whether you're a retailer, whether you're B2B, just if you're concerned about your user experience. So I will say that check out our site, check out our blog. We have a lot of other thought leadership content, including posters, ebooks, physical books, just a lot of stuff about PWA. And that includes please download your PWA for Oracle e-commerce, specifically ebook at mcfadyen.com/oracle-pwa. With that, I thank you for sitting through this session, and I open up the floor to questions.
Perfect. So I have a few here. One is I heard that with headless front ends, you lose the benefits of BCC and similar tools in OCC. Is that true?
No, actually, it's not. With PWA, you maintain all of those same management capabilities, whether it's the catalog, the images, any of that stuff. It just remains it remains just like if you were using native. It's just the changes to the PWA front end, instead of being done through a theme manager or anything like that in terms of dialing things and changing positions. That is then done separately in the PWA code itself. But the management of the operational management and the day-to-day merchandising and things like that, that still maintains all the native OCC controls.
Perfect. How long does it typically take to replace an existing user interface with PWA?
That's a loaded question. It really depends if you're looking for just a simple lift and shift, or if you're looking to go, complete full Monty user experience design. But it can be done in as little as, say a straight lift and shift of something that was it's a responsive site. It's good user interface. You're happy with it. You really just want to enable some of the benefits of the PWA. It can be done in as little as 4, 5, 6 weeks. Again, depending on what shape the code is in and whatnot. But yeah, so from a few weeks upwards of months, if it's something that's really complex and you have a custom CMS behind it, or you want to do something like multi-site really crazy. But by and large, in terms of like upgrade bang for the buck, it's pretty good. It's not a crazy expensive project, given what we get used to in the e-commerce realm in terms of the impact that it'll make. The ROI on it is very high.
Perfect. What if I build a PWA for my ATG platform? Can I reuse that same PWA if I later move to OCC?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, PWA as a bridge technology is absolutely valid. And that's like when you think about anything where you're decoupling, you're completely decoupling one function or another into like microservices, or you're just going headless with your front end. This is a perfect example of that. So if you were looking to migrate from ATG to OCC, but not looking to kind of eat the whole elephant or whatever you use there, the best way to do that would be then to abstract the front end, build yourself that headless environment with the PWA, and then you really don't have to worry about that front end when you're swapping the back end over. It's just a matter of you have that API layer there. Again, we were looking at this. There was that that view storefront layer where everything was, all the rest of the APIs were interacting. The platform sits underneath of that, so you just swap that out and point that over towards the pointers over towards OCC, and yes, you can absolutely maintain that front end with minimal coding to the PWA itself. Seamless experience for the users. They still think they were getting that new website, that launched a few months ago. You then do the transition over, and all of a sudden you've got the full benefits of both that PWA interface and OCC. So yeah, great. It's a great bridge technology.
All right. Can you tell me about a real world application where you're using PWA?
Yes, we have a client right now that is, it's actually a $52 billion food and beverage, well, beverage distribution company. They're a beverage manufacturing company, but they're making a food and beverage distribution play in emerging markets of Mexico and Latin America. And they are leveraging a PWA front end, and it's the rationale is fascinating because they're supplying basically corner markets and small stores and stalls in Mexico, Latin, or some other markets, but they don't have broadband access in terms of it's mostly 2G and 3G, and they don't communicate at all via email. Like they just straight up do not ever check email. It's all either SMS or more likely WhatsApp. So there's WhatsApp integration with that site in terms of like notifications and whatnot, which again, PWA helps integrate with that on most OSs. But the page load speed was huge for them because they're not going to sit around and it's like the Google Maps, the Google Graph said, if it's more than 3 seconds, they're just, why am I wasting my time on this? I have to run my store, I have to supply my store. So they're using that to aggregate instead of that store owner going to 5 or 6 different suppliers to get all their supplies for their store. They only need to go to one website, a stable, mobile friendly, very fast website with content caching if they lose online capabilities. So for all of those reasons, they've just seen wildfire adoption and very low bounce rates and things like that just because of the experience. But it's been great, and that's exciting because we're now having an online marketplace to that as well. So that's just going to amplify it and drive even more traffic and more product capabilities and that whole endless aisle experience. So that's a real world example of what's going on right now. That marketplace actually launches in a couple of weeks. I would mention the client, but we're under orders not to until they go public with press. So for now, that'll have to suffice. But it's working out very well.
All right. Your Lighthouse OCC examples all score below 15. What is the best straight OCC mobile/desktop performance you've achieved without PWA conversion?
I'm going to have to ask our development team or our UX practice lead that question. I did not do the testing for those myself. I have done testing kicking around on it. I believe on some live sites we've seen up into the 30s and 40s with native themes that are very, very optimized. I don't think we've seen above, personally, I haven't seen anybody discussing or anything above that. The ones that I tested just anecdotally were around that, but I'm sure there's some that have got higher. But whatever it is, as soon as you add that, either AMP architecture for static content or the PWA for dynamic content, it's going to dramatically go up, and the page loads would then go from, if you're scoring at a 50, your page load's probably around 5, maybe 4.5 seconds. That will compress down dramatically to under a second. But I believe that's the best that I've seen. But I will ask my team. We'll follow up and let you know what the best we've seen on native is.
Okay. Is there a certain framework the McFadyen developers prefer for PWA development?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to do PWA. Some platforms have tools that offer native capabilities. We have found the Vue storefront framework is the best and most flexible in terms of which you get to pick which library use React and Angular. You can pretty much pick and choose there your favorite weapon of choice, if you will, if you're a developer. But it's stable, it's well supported. We built this example on it, right? There wasn't an existing Vue connection for OCC, but because OCC is so flexible, API based, all the modern best practices are there. It was pretty easy to build on top of that, and starting with those well-documented OCC APIs, and then layering something like a well-structured Vue storefront on top of that. It really does accelerate it. And then, like I said, we built a reference store wrapping all of those things together for an even further accelerator. So that's our weapon of choice for PWA frameworks.
Okay, and could the Oracle Content and Experience Cloud be used to power a PWA?
Oh yeah, that's a great question actually. The Content Experience Cloud is a powerful CMS, and really the beauty of PWA, it doesn't really care where the CMS lies, right? Like the question before, can you use the native catalog and order management capabilities of OCC? Absolutely, it's just the API connection. So instead of the API connection for the content and catalog being the OCC backend, it would just be pointed towards Content Experience Cloud. And yeah, then you would run all the orders through the OCC framework and just administer the CMS component through that, the content experience. So yeah, absolutely would work.
Okay, and the last question I have, unless something else comes in while you're answering this, is what would B2B applications be for a PWA?
Well, that's a good one, because you think about, you really think, well, your head goes to kind of retail applications of the PWA technology. But I immediately think, that was a good question. I immediately think of low bandwidth applications, right? If you're on a job site where there's some, I'm thinking manufacturers and distributors, you're not always in the most, metro area in terms of like connectivity. A lot of rural areas, just with the terrain and whatnot, have connectivity issues. Sometimes your warehouses or your manufacturing plants will just have dead zones because of the way of the building construction and whatnot. So I think of the offline capabilities there and the caching capabilities and things like that as advantages. And then if you're if you're a warehouse manager and you need to resupply your folks with safety equipment and things like that, if you're ordering through a distributor and you lose connectivity, well, now you have to take a note on your phone or you have to do something. If you have a PWA, catalog is cached, you can put it in your cart, you can place the order while the person says they need it. You can take that example and scale that in any number of ways, but I would think that would be one of the big examples of an advantage. And also just the fact that consumerization of B2B e-commerce in general. The pandemic has really compressed innovation cycles there. For really 7 years, some analysts are saying, just because of the volume being placed of orders being placed online, the lack of personal contact and reticence for personal contact events and things like that. So there's just a flood of business being pushed online and expectations then being pushed online for B2B. So PWA would help meet that. You're expecting the quick site, you're expecting the Amazon experience. It just helps deliver that and meet those consumer expectations for B2B, just like it does with retail.
Fantastic. So that was the last question. I want to thank everybody, of course, for joining us, and thank you so much to Tom for speaking with us. Be sure to sign up for any additional sessions you would like to attend today or tomorrow via the Agenda Builder, and of course, stop by the exhibitor virtual booths as well. So thank you so much, and please, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.